I really just wanted to take a minute, read the piece in my own voice, and tell you about the reaction that I've received, and tell you about some of the things I've heard and some of the things that have been put on this essay that I don't feel are what I was trying to say at all. So I'm going to read it, which I've never done this before, so we'll see how this goes. I regret being a slut. Upon opening Louise Perry's new book, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, A New Guide to Sex in the 21st Century, I'm moved to tears by the dedication. For the women who learned it the hard way. Unlike many other people who have read and reviewed Perry's work, reading her book wouldn't be some academic exercise in contemplating how liberal feminism has let women down. It wouldn't be evaluating what those poor sluts over there have endured in the wake of the sexual revolution. Reading her book was personal. I am one of those sluts. I'm a case study for her thesis, a cautionary tale. I knew this book was going to be difficult, and it made me realize it's time to finish this essay, one I've been trying to write for 4 years. It's a tough needle to thread. I'm grateful for the ability to control my reproductive cycle and make my own money, but that freedom has come at a price. The dark side of the sexual revolution is that even though it liberated women, unyoking sex from the consequences has primarily benefited men. I was first inspired to write this piece when a 19-year-old woman I used to wait tables with asked me, "Bridget, have you ever regretted having sex with a man?" I laughed. Yeah, all of them. That's not entirely true. There was my first love in high school and my first husband. But if I'm honest with myself, of the dozens of men I've been with, at least the ones I remember, I can only think of a handful I don't regret. The rest I would put in the category of casual, which I would define as sex that is either meaningless or mediocre or both. If I get really honest with myself, I'd say most of these usually drunken encounters left me feeling empty and demoralized and worthless. I wouldn't have said that at the time, though. At the time, I would have told you I was liberated, even while I tried to drink away the sick feeling of rejection while my most recent hookup didn't call me back. At the time, I would have said one-night stands made me feel emboldened. But in reality, I was using sex like a drug, trying unsuccessfully to fill a hole inside me with men. Pun intended. I know regretting most of my sexual encounters is not something a sex-positive feminist who used to write a column for Playboy is supposed to admit. And for years, I didn't. Let me be clear. Being a slut and sleeping with a lot of men is not the only behavior I regret. Even more damaging was what I told myself in order to justify the fact that I was disposable to these men. I told myself I didn't care. I didn't care when a man ghosted me. I didn't care when he left in the middle of the night or hinted that he wanted me to leave. The walks of shame, the blackouts, the anxiety. The lie I told myself for decades was, I'm not in pain, I'm empowered. I knew it would be hard to read this. Looking back, it isn't a surprise that I lied to myself, because from a young age, sex was something I was lied to about. Long before I ever had sex, I felt ashamed of my natural sexual urges and awkward in my blossoming female body. Growing up Catholic, all I remember about sex was feeling bad about it before I even knew what it was. I only knew that sex before marriage was wrong. Even the thought of a sexual act or masturbation filled me with debilitating guilt. The first time I kissed a boy, I was convinced I'd be punished, struck down by an angry, misogynistic God. As I got older, I was told to guard my virginity. Well-meaning mothers and aunts were clear that I needed to withhold sex in order to get a man to love and respect me. Sex was a commodity, a priceless gem I had to hang on to that increased in value the longer I held it. It made me feel like property, and although I don't think that was the intention of the wise women who had learned their own lessons the hard way, for me, sex became inextricably linked to my self-worth. The shame and guilt I grew up with regarding sex felt oppressive. I resented the double standard that men could be promiscuous and it would raise their status, and a woman would be slut-shamed for similar behavior. My burgeoning sexuality would unfold as a reaction to these repressive religious orthodoxies, old-school notions of sexual status, and trauma. I lost my virginity at 17 to my boss at a restaurant where I worked. And a year later, I experienced my first sexual trauma. I felt damaged and dirty, and I blamed myself. Everyone responds differently to these situations. I dealt with the overwhelming shame by becoming hypersexual and promiscuous. The culture was right there to pick me up and dust me off. I doubled down on being a proud slut and internalized the biggest and most damaging lie, that loveless sex is empowering. I basked in the girl power glow of that delusion for decades, weaponizing my sexuality while convincing myself I was full of the divine feminine. I was full of shit. I told myself that because I could seduce man, I was powerful. But as Perry says in her book, women can all too easily fail to recognize that being desired is not the same thing as being held in high esteem. Deep down inside, I knew that to be the case. But as a defense mechanism, I created a man-eater persona. My mantras were rigid. You can either have a career or a relationship, but you can't have both. Intimacy is creepy. Motherhood and children are a trap. Sex is only about power. Another set of lies built on trauma. Sex isn't just about power. It's also about intimacy and vulnerability and trust, things I wanted nothing to do with, because implicit in modern dating is a complete lack of expectations, especially those of chivalry. Whenever a man wanted to pick up the tab or pull out the chair or open the door or pick me up or take me to dinner or see me during the day or wait longer than the first date to have sex, I was shocked and suspicious of them. Was he a serial killer? Casual sex is fraught with insecurity and miscommunication. Intimacy and love are punchlines. When a man I slept with had the courtesy to reach out, I mistook relief for happiness, rewiring my brain to be grateful for the bare minimum. The saddest realization is how low I set the bar. A lifetime of allowing myself to be the other woman, taken for granted or treated like a doormat under the false pretense of being empowered, came to head one night with the arrival of a text message from an on-again, off-again lover. "Good night, baby, I love you," it said, quickly followed by, "Wrong person." Rock bottom doesn't always look like losing everything or ending up in jail. Sometimes it can be that sick feeling in your gut when you know emotionally you're done. I wanted to be able to have meaningless sex like a guy, but it didn't work. After years of writing for Playboy, I've learned it doesn't work for a lot of men either. For years, I tried unsuccessfully not to catch the feels. Even that expression is so telling about the way emotions are viewed regarding relationships, as if they're a cold or a flu or some kind of sickness you need to get over. I'm not speaking for all women. I know many women with a solid sense of self who happily have loveless sex. This piece won't make them defensive. But a lot of women will read this and bristle, just like I did when I used to read something that pushed back on the lie I'd built my entire identity around. I'm now 43 years old, and I'm in the first truly healthy, intimate relationship in my life with my second husband. We recently had a daughter. And in the wake of her birth, I've been thinking a lot about the conversations I'm going to have with her, and the conversations I wish I could go back in time and have with young Bridget. I'd tell her, sex can be empowering when you're coming from a position of healthy self-esteem. If you're coming from a place of trauma or insecurity, casual sex won't heal that. In fact, it might set you back and undermine any progress regarding your feelings of self-worth. If you know your value, you're less likely to sleep with someone who doesn't value you. Cherish yourself and you will be cherished. You shouldn't have to withhold sex for a man to respect you. He should respect you regardless. Sexual empowerment has nothing to do with how many people you do or don't sleep with. It has to do with how comfortable you are in your skin, no matter your decision. It's not about waiting until you're in love to have sex. It's about making sure that first you love yourself. I regret being a slut. I regret it because I regret that those men can say they slept with me. Still, that's how I know I finally value myself. Every woman should feel this way. Sleeping with me is a privilege and you have to be worthy.
Fala, cowboys, beleza? Bom, o vídeo de hoje, ele é um vídeo, eu fiz uma edição, né, sobre esse vídeo que é dessa moça aí relatando, né, uma ex-colunista da Playboy aí e tal, né, relatando o seu passado e tudo mais. Esse vídeo, ele inclusive foi legendado pelo Felipe do canal Espectro Racional, o antigo Sigmando. Um abraço aí pra ele, né? Sei o quanto que é difícil legendar aí os vídeos, então certamente deu bastante trabalho, né? Eu não trouxe para vocês o vídeo inteiro, na íntegra, tá? Eu trouxe uma parte dele, as partes mais importantes, né? E vou agora comentar com vocês a respeito, né? A respeito do quê? Desse sentimento, que é um sentimento que vai acontecer cada vez mais, com mais frequência, justamente porque se para ela, né, que tá ali na faixa dos 40 e poucos anos, esse impacto já aconteceu, O que dirá para esta nova geração né, de mulheres que está, né, cada vez mais inserida nessa cultura que propriamente entrega para elas essa ideia de que não, é tudo bem, é tudo lindo, maravilhoso, esse empoderamento todo da relação íntima e tudo mais, né? E justamente não serão todas, né? Sempre existe exceção, né? Mas não serão todas que poderão lidar bem com esse sentimento dali para frente, né? Mesmo aquelas que conseguirem acessar relacionamento, como foi o caso, né, da moça aí do vídeo, né, que conseguiu de alguma maneira, né, ter acesso a essa relação, ainda assim a probabilidade desse relacionamento, né, é ter ali um momento duradouro, vamos dizer assim, é menor. A gente sabe muito bem o quanto que, né, quanto mais parceiros, né, uma pessoa tem, menor a probabilidade dela conseguir ter uma ligação, né, sentimental real com um parceiro fixo, no caso, né? Então, toda essa dinâmica apresentada, tudo que ela falou, né, certamente ajudam muito a compreender, né? E é claro, né, sempre vem na cabeça a possibilidade do será que esse arrependimento é real ou não, tá? Tenho certeza que muitos aqui vão questionar isso, mas o fato é que, sendo real ou não, a situação que ela descreveu é uma situação que sim, possivelmente pode acontecer, onde você antes tem ali talvez uma educação muito rígida né, o feminino ele já tem um pouco disso, né, desse sentimento de que ela está sempre sendo colocada para baixo, né? O feminino tem muito essa busca pela igualdade com o homem, né? Então há uma certa, vou usar o termo inveja, né? Um termo mais freudiano para explicar um pouco isso, né? Então é um aspecto que realmente eu enxergo muito bem. Então o que acontece, né? Uma moça jovem numa criação como essa olha para a vida ali, né, dos homens ao redor, eles podem isso, eles podem aquilo e eu não posso. É claro que eu posso, eu sou empoderada, olha o que a mídia está dizendo para mim, então eu vou atrás disso e não sei o quê. E aí ela vai cada vez mais mentindo para si, né, vivendo esse carrossel aí, né, e tal. E por consequência, depois ela acaba se deparando com a dificuldade, né, com a dificuldade emocional, a dificuldade para ter ali, como eu falei, essa relação mais saudável com alguém. E assim, isso é algo que o feminino ele busca muito. Por isso que quando ela diz ali que essa liberdade toda, esses acessos que ela possuía, né, no fim eles premiavam muito mais o homem, né? É porque justamente para elas, né, a busca pelo relacionamento sério costuma ser a principal delas. Uma mulher ter acesso à relação íntima a rodo aí, né, com vários parceiros, isso não tem valor nenhum, tá? Não é uma conquista de fato, por mais que, né, como eu disse, a mídia, ela mesma citou, né, causam essa sensação de que elas estão no controle, de que elas têm esse poder todo, né, e no fim, o que elas estão fazendo de fato é cada vez mais diminuindo este valor, né? Então ela mesma citou de que na educação dela ela foi, né, ela foi ensinada a tratar a relação íntima como se fosse uma espécie de commodity, como se fosse uma espécie de algo de valor e não sei o quê. Então ela, ao invés de fazer esse tratamento num aspecto de resguardo, ela fez num tratamento de poder, né? Então tudo isso citado ao longo do vídeo, né? Não sei se todas as partes que eu estou falando, né, passaram aí para vocês. Em todo caso, vocês podem também assistir ao vídeo lá do canal Espectro Racional. Vou deixar o link aqui embaixo, qualquer coisa, tá? Porém, o fato é que tudo que ela relatou no vídeo, tudo que ela falou a respeito, são coisas que realmente podem muito bem afetar aí as mulheres dessa geração, de gerações anteriores e por aí vai. Então, é um cuidado, né, que muitas não terão. Cabe a nós apenas analisar e tomar um cuidado para não entrar em um relacionamento com um perfil, né, que passou por esse aspecto. Caso você queira entrar em um relacionamento, eu evitaria, tá? Ainda que o arrependimento seja genuíno, como eu citei, ou não. Primeiro que você não vai ter como saber, e segundo, né, que mesmo com o arrependimento genuíno, as marcas permanecem, né? Então, eu não recomendaria para alguém acessar relacionamento com essas condições, ok? Então por isso, tá? Simplesmente por isso. Em todo caso, é um relato muito interessante que certamente pode ter aí ensinado a muitas delas aí que leram essa publicação dessa colunista aí e tal, assim como o livro que ela citou também durante o texto, né? E é isso, tá? Então é isso que eu queria passar para vocês hoje, beleza? Então, tamo junto, cowboys. Não esquece do like, não esquece da sua inscrição, fechou? Tamo junto e até a próxima.